just remind members put their phones on silent. Garmil Magat. Agus spoken with Jirai Guji Keshton and Aganuary. I'll now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. Achiachta Mary Lou MacDonald.
Gurmagat Las Count Corla. Taoiseach, more than 5,500 children have now been killed in Israel's brutal bombardment of Gaza. 13,500 Gazans have been slaughtered. Nearly 6,000 are missing. Entire Palestinian families wiped out. Entire neighbourhoods and communities wiped from the face of the earth. Generations erased. 45 days of horror have rained down on the Palestinian people in a merciless crescendo of 75 years of oppression, occupation and apartheid. Israel's relentless onslaught means in Gaza, nowhere is safe. Homes, hospitals and schools have been obliterated, places of worship destroyed, refugee camps bombed. Not even babies are safe. Newborn babies have died because incubators stopped working. On Sunday, 31 premature babies were evacuated from the decimated Al-Shifa hospital to Egypt. That these vulnerable babies could be considered the lucky ones speaks to the utter depravity of this onslaught. As millions are displaced, the refugee people of Gaza face starvation and the outbreak of disease. Having already been forced south, they are now being ordered to move again. Where do they go, Taoiseach? This systematic dehumanisation and annihilation of the Palestinian people is happening before the eyes of the world, live on TV and on social media. The Irish government must hold Israel to account. The South African government and others have referred Israel to the International Criminal Court. Ireland must do the same. The Spanish government and the Norwegian Parliament are moving to formally recognise the Palestinian state. Ireland must do the same. The Belgian government has called for sanctions against Israel. Ireland must do the same. Israel must be held to account, and we need a ceasefire now. We need a deal to secure the release of all hostages now. We hope that Irish girl Emily Hand will be finally returned safely to her family. Aid must be let into Gaza immediately. People need food, water, medicines and fuel urgently. The onslaught and the siege must end. This is what the people of Gaza need to save their children, to stop the destruction of an entire people. The Palestinian nation faces another Nakba, catastrophe. The people of Gaza face annihilation, and the Dáil must stand together saying no, never. On European streets, on Arab streets, on streets across the world, ordinary people in their tens of thousands march, protest and called for a full and immediate ceasefire, and this is the imperative. Le cuaiglo stachad tá légar agus shlecht búlse ag muintir Gaza. An tain rud amháin a churthaid ahrú umlán an cás uafásach seo nó sus cogaí loireach. Cahir deire a chur leis an marú loireach. Taoiseach, you have said that Israeli actions cannot be without consequence. What are those consequences? Taoiseach, the one thing that can transform this awful situation is an immediate, full, unequivocal ceasefire, not a temporary pause, a complete end to hostilities. That is what is needed to save the lives of all, hostages, civilians, children, entire communities. This is what the world is calling for now. Can I invite you, Taoiseach, to make that clear call from the Dáil today?
Thanks very much, Deputy, for raising this very important issue once again here in the Dáil. The government's position and the position of Ireland is clear. We're calling for a ceasefire that will allow humanitarian aid to get into Gaza, food, fuel, medicine, whatever is needed. We're calling for the hostages to be released, and we believe a ceasefire can facilitate that. We're calling for the killing to stop, and that's why a ceasefire must be adhered to by all sides, not just by Israel, but also by Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and the other armed groups that are involved in this conflict. And a ceasefire can create the space, perhaps, to begin contacts about the day after, about how Gaza is going to be returned to Palestinian control, how it's going to be managed in the weeks and months and years ahead. And that's why we're calling for a ceasefire, and that is the position of the government, and very much our position. We understand that there are some discussions and some talks underway between intermediaries involving the release of hostages. I had a chance to speak with the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Qatar only yesterday. I'll meet today with the ambassadors of some Arab countries and some Muslim countries. And as you know, the Taoiseach has been very involved in contacts as well. And we are particularly pursuing the case of Emily Hand, a young Irish-Israeli girl who we believe is being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas. And we're doing everything we can to make sure that if there is the release of some hostages by Hamas in the coming days, that children are first among those to be released. And we're very strongly of the view that hostages should never be taken by anyone in any conflict, anywhere, ever. But particularly the taking of children as hostages is particularly wrong. And we're pushing and using all our contacts and all our abilities to ensure that if there is a hostage release in the coming days, that Emily Hand is among one of those to be released. And that's a major priority for us now as a government. We should not forget only one Irish citizen has been killed so far in this conflict, Kim Dante, who was killed by Hamas in Israel attending a music festival, and there is an Irish citizen being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza, and we're doing everything we can to facilitate her release. In relation to the International Criminal Court, we've had contact with the International Criminal Court. There is an investigation underway, has been for several years. It doesn't require another referral, that's just symbolic. What they actually want is something of real value. The resources and tools they need to carry out the investigation. And that's why we've provided an extra $3 million to the International Criminal Court to give them the resources and the tools to carry out the investigation. Where we differ, Deputy, I think, is that your call is to refer Israel to the International Criminal Court. That's not how it's done. The International Criminal Court looks at the situation on the ground, and it's not just about actions that Israel has committed that may well be war crimes. It's also about things that Hamas may have done or other armed groups have done. And that's where I think we differ, but perhaps you want to clarify that.
And I'm sure you're aware of the clarification. The referral to the criminal court would be actions that occurred on the occupied Palestinian territory, because, of course, Palestine, unlike Israel, supports and is a signatory to the International Criminal Court. Taoiseach, I very much welcome the fact that there are live discussions and the real prospect now of hostage release. And of course, all of us long for young Emily Hand to be back with her parents. She celebrated her, with her family, I should say, she celebrated her 9th birthday only last Friday. But I have to put it to you, Taoiseach, that the ceasefire creates the space for hostages to be returned, the space for dialogue, to very quickly move to re-establishing a peace process. This is where all of this will end. But part of the mix has to be accountability for Israel. And in everything that you've said, and I don't differ with you on any of it, actually, Taoiseach, in respect of a total ceasefire on all sides, absolutely. To criticise the October 7th attack by Hamas, absolutely. We've walked that ground many, many times. But what you have failed to do, and what you're resisting to, and what is necessary to do, Taoiseach, is to hold Israel to account. I asked you the question. You've said Israeli actions cannot be without consequence. What are the consequences?
Thanks, Deputy. The consequences are an investigation that is being carried out by the International Criminal Court, a body we support, a body we provided additional funding to as a meaningful action, precisely so that they can carry out the investigation they want to carry out into activities in the occupied territories by Israel, of course, but also by other militant groups like Hamas, who may also have committed war crimes. And that's the work they're doing. And I think we should support them in that work. And that's why we've provided additional funding for the ICC to do exactly that. In terms of further actions, in terms of further sanctions, I'm strongly of the view that they can only happen on a multilateral basis. The whole point of imposing sanctions, and we have imposed sanctions on many countries for different reasons, is that they do more harm to the country that's being sanctioned than the country imposing the sanctions, and that's why they only work when they're done on a multilateral basis, and we're nowhere near that point yet at European level or an international level. But I've said, and I'll say it again at European meetings, we can't continue to aid Palestine and trade with Israel in the way we have done in the past. That's going to have to change in some way.
Taoiseach, the government is running an advertising campaign to highlight the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It tells us that disability rights are human rights. It goes on to state, everyone in Ireland has a role in advancing the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I really can't imagine a more tone-deaf marketing slogan, because that's all it is, a slogan. Disability rights are not rights people can exercise in Ireland, and the only people who can do anything about advancing legal entitlements under the UN Convention is your government. Your government writes policy, it has responsibility for providing services, it allocates funding, it sets recruitment targets, it controls capacity. It is your government's job to ensure that no child is left behind and that every child has access to a timely assessment of need, appropriate services and educational supports. But Taoiseach, your government is failing on all counts. I shouldn't need to remind you of this, but disability services are on their knees. Rights are entirely notional. They exist on paper and in government advertising jingles, but not in reality. 16,522 children are currently waiting for their first appointment with Children's Disability Network teams. More than 10,000 of them have been waiting for over a year with no intervention and no therapy. More than a third of posts in Children's Disability Network teams are vacant. In some teams, vacancy rates are more than 60%. Because of this, some children wait for years for any supports at all. And then, parents of those children turn on the radio and hear they are responsible for advancing rights under the Convention. It really is disgraceful. Because what you left out of your advertising campaign is that your government hasn't signed up to the part of the Convention that would actually allow people to exercise their rights. The Programme for Government commits to signing and ratifying the optional protocol of the Convention. We are 3 years into this government and we don't have a date. Ratifying the optional protocol would enable disabled people to make complaints to the UN about breaches of their rights under the Convention. Taoiseach, to make matters even worse, in response to my parliamentary question, I couldn't actually believe my eyes. The Minister informed me that the government has spent 1.5 million on this essentially false advertising campaign. To put that 1.5 million in perspective, the government allocated just 64 million in the budget for additional disability services. Meanwhile, Ministers O'Gorman and Rabbitte recently published a roadmap for children's disability services, which is increasingly looking like it will be the road to nowhere with no additional budget.
Thank you, Deputy.
Taoiseach, do you accept the government has responsibility for ensuring people's rights under the Convention? When will the government ratify the optional protocol? And when will a roadmap for disability services get a budget?
Thanks very much, Deputy, for raising this important question. It was during my first term as Taoiseach that we ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and we're not a country that just ratifies a convention and then moves on. We're a country that makes sure that we've done what we need to do before we ratify a convention, and that's what we did on this occasion, and it wasn't straightforward, but we got it done, and I particularly want to acknowledge the work of former Minister Finian McGrath as Minister for Disability during that government in really leading the charge to make sure that we ratified that convention, and we did. In terms of disability services, I know there's a lot of shortcomings. I wouldn't deny that for a second. I do think in some areas we've made a lot of progress, particularly in education. Take, for example, the whole area of special education, probably 15,000 to 20,000 SNAs now when there would only have been a few hundred at one point in the past. A dedicated minister with a dedicated budget for doing that under Minister Madigan, additional special classes, additional special schools. I really think on any objective basis we've made a lot of progress when it comes to education and also on social welfare, as you know, increased payments and increased support to enable people with disabilities to enter the workforce and to facilitate employers to enable them to do so. And things we've done around travel passes, around the medical card, for example, reassuring people that if they take up work and they have a disability, they won't lose their travel pass, won't lose their medical card. In a lot of areas when it comes to services, there are enormous shortcomings, and we all know that from our constituency practices, from the people we meet who tell us about the delays they're facing, either to get an assessment of need or to get the therapies they need. A lot of that is down to the non-availability of the staff that we need to do it, those who have the skills to do the work that needs to be done. But we have provided an extra 195 million in the budget for 2024. The roadmap to improve access to CDNTs was published only 3 weeks ago, and there's a big focus on recruitment and retention of the staff that we need to provide the services that people with disabilities need. And there's a whole new grade of assistant therapists, or assistant therapy grades, being funded in 2024, which we believe will help. And Minister Abbott informs me that we are undertaking a review of the steps needed to allow for the optional protocol to be ratified, and it remains government policy to do that during this government's term of office.
Taoiseach, those kind of platitudes and promises are something that people have heard so many times before, and they bear no resemblance on the reality. You know, the reports about disability services in Ireland are far from the language you're using there. It's language like unmet needs, wasted lives. You say your government was the one to ratify it. How many years later? And you still haven't ratified the optional protocol aspect of it. How many years have you had to get to that point? And in this programme for government, there was a promise to ratify. We're 3 years in, it hasn't happened. Progressing disability services is a failure. It's ruining people's lives. And the worst part of it is that actually when you become an adult in Ireland, if you have a disability or a disabled person, that's when things actually get even worse. You mentioned employment rates. Ireland has the lowest employment rates for disabled people in the EU. There's no thought or consideration given to house building in relation to independent supported living, suitable housing in the government plans for housing. Absolutely nothing. All rhetoric. Taoiseach, we're 3 years into this government. I'm going to ask you the same question again. When will you ratify the optional protocol so people can actually exercise the rights that you're spending 1.5 million on advertising?
Thanks, Deputy. We don't have a date for it at this stage, but it remains government policy, it remains a government commitment to do exactly that during this term in office of this government. And the Minister is reviewing the steps needed to allow the optional protocol to be ratified. But we're not going to wait for an optional protocol to the UN Convention to be ratified to make improvements in the lives of people with disabilities. We're doing that. I've set out what we've done in education so far, where we've come on leaps and bounds, I think, from where we would have been not too long ago. Set out what we're doing in terms of social protection measures, the increases that people will see this week and also in December and January and through next year. The work we're doing to increase the number of people with disabilities in the workforce, including in the public sector, where we set an enhanced target, and then the reforms that we're trying to bring in to improve service provision in particular, which I accept is nowhere near where it needs to be. And the real difficulty we have there is not a lack of political will or a lack of funding or a lack of ambition. It's simply being able to find the skilled and qualified staff that we need to provide the assessments and therapies that people with disabilities need.
Deputy Richard Boyd-Barrett.
Taoiseach, tens of thousands of people took to the streets of Dublin this weekend, outraged at the atrocities that Israel is inflicting on the people of Gaza. Thousands more will be outside the Dáil tomorrow evening, calling on you to support People Before Profits' motion calling for sanctions on Israel for the crimes that it is committing, the massacre it is committing in Gaza, calling for sanctions against Israeli government representatives, officials and ambassadors who are involved in supporting or justifying Israel's massacre in Gaza. And one of the words that is on the lips and will be on the lips of protesters tomorrow, was at the weekend and are on the lips of millions across the world who are taking to the streets and protesting about the horror that Israel is inflicting on the people of Gaza, is the word genocide. And I want to remind you, because this hasn't come up in the discussion, that the Irish government has obligations under the Genocide Convention, along with 140 countries. It's in Irish law from 1973, and that convention requires states to do absolutely everything within their power to prevent a genocide taking place. And the definition of genocide is for any of the following acts to be committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, forcibly transferring the children of the group to another group, and so on. Now, Craig Mockaber, who is the UN High Commissioner of Human Rights, resigned on the 28th of October, stating that what Israel was doing in Gaza and to the Palestinians was a textbook example of genocide. William Shabs, who's the emeritus professor in UCG, who's a specialist, world-renowned specialist in genocide, says that Israel is acting with genocidal intent. And when you look at what's happening, 13,000 dead, 33,000 injured, 275,000 homes destroyed, 1.7 million displaced, and a government who, for example, the Deputy Speaker of the Israeli Parliament last week said about Israel's actions, "We are being too humane, we must burn Gaza." We have all the evidence we need that a genocide is being committed, and yet your government has done nothing, and it is not discharging its responsibilities under the Genocide Convention, which you are required to do under law. And you are facilitating the US military at Shannon Airport, who have very publicly stated that they are supporting militarily and financially all of Israel's actions in Gaza. So I ask you, when are you going to act, which you were required to do under the Genocide Convention, everything in your power to stop the genocide that has been committed and to stop facilitating US troops at Shannon who are militarily, financially and politically supporting the Israeli genocidal actions in Gaza?
Thanks very much, Deputy. We'll be proposing a counter motion or an amendment to your motion tonight, in that we will deeply deplore the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, including the death of over 11,000 people, almost half of them children, as a consequence of Israel's military actions in Gaza. We will condemn the barbaric acts by Hamas on the 7th of October in Israel. We will also specifically condemn the killing of children and civilians. We will raise our very deep concerns about violence in the West Bank, particular settler violence against Palestinians. We will note that an investigation is being carried out by the prosecutor of the ICC and the additional funding that we provided for the ICC, and add to our call for all hostages to be released. Your own motion, Deputy, while you're very welcome, of course, to put it down, doesn't mention at all Hamas or the human rights abuses committed against Israeli citizens, and we think that's an omission, and that's why we can't support your motion and why we've put down our own one. We don't believe that what happened in Israel, the killing of 1,200 people, the killing of children, taking of hostages, is so insignificant that it didn't merit even a line in your motion, and that's why, Deputy, we're not going to support it, and why we've put down a counter motion which we think is more balanced. And I hope, even if you can't vote for it on the first vote, you will at least vote for it on the second vote. In relation to Shannon Airport, under the terms of the Air Navigation Foreign Military Aircraft Order in 1952, all foreign military aircraft wishing to overfly and land in the state require diplomatic clearance from the Minister of Foreign Affairs. This is subject to strict conditions, with full respect to Ireland's policy of military neutrality, including that the aircraft is unarmed, that it carries no arms, ammunition or explosives, that it does not engage in intelligence gathering, and that the flight in question does not form part of a military exercise or operation. The policy is well known and fully understood by the United States and other international partners, and is done in compliance with Ireland's traditional policy of military neutrality.
First of all, on Shannon, you trust the United States to tell the truth about what's on those planes. This is the same United States who told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and then continued to kill 1 million people in Iraq based on a pack of lies about weapons of mass destruction, and you won't even search the planes when they are backing up the slaughter that Israel is conducting. And you didn't answer the question about genocide. Now, when are we going to start to discuss it? Because that is all of the evidence fits the descriptions of genocide. Craig Mockaber said, quote, "This is a textbook case of genocide." Now, genocide is the most serious crime that can be committed. It is the most horrendous and obscene crime. And that is what I am asking you to respond to, and this has not been brought up to date. They're not even covered by the ICC. I'm asking you about the Genocide Convention and the obligation on a state to do absolutely everything required to prevent a genocide taking place when there is evidence that that is what is happening. And I don't know why you're laughing about the use of the term genocide.
Thank you. We're way over time.
Deputy, I'm not. And I appreciate why you have to say things like that, but I can absolutely guarantee I'm not. And I'm sorry you had to make that up, quite frankly. Mr. McCartney was telling me about something else. Just in relation to Shannon, Deputy, the US doesn't fly planes through Shannon to Israel. It does bring some of its troops to service people through to bases in Europe and other parts of the world, and has done that for a very long time. And I've set out the rules in relation to the use of Shannon Airport for transit. Deputy, I think what's happened to the Palestinian people for the past 75 years is shameful. It is appalling. I think the international community as part of that, the West and the Arab world have let them down extremely badly, and that's putting it way too mildly. It's been a story of dispossession, it's been a story of occupation, it's been a story of significant loss and killings, and that has to change. And I hope that one of the things that can come out of this, if anything can come out of this, is a renewed effort from all sides, from the West, from the Arab world, from the Islamic world, to demand a two-state solution and to give the Palestinians the homeland that they need. Deputy, I'm not an expert on terms like genocide, but certainly, to me, my understanding of genocide is that it's an attempt to obliterate an entire nation or an entire people. So, for example, the Holocaust to Shoah, the killing of 6 million Jews, half their population, that was certainly a genocide, or attempted one.
No, thank you. We're going to move on. Peter, just the clock. So, Tommy Rayleigh Bustella and Kesh Tieranuk, the Deputy Michael Healy-Ray.
Thank you very much, Les Concolor. And first of all, Taoiseach, I just want to put on the record that for nearly 4 decades I've been providing accommodation myself to all sectors of society, and including in the last couple of years to Ukrainian families fleeing the war. I want to speak today, Minister, on a subject that has risen its head very much so in the last couple of weeks in the town of Killarney, and that is the fact that 77 international protection applicants were to be located on the Muckross Road in Killarney, a highly tourist, highly residential area. And at yesterday's full council meeting, there was a resolution passed. It was put forward by Councillor Niall O'Callaghan, asking that the Minister meet with a group from the town. I am very glad that it has been organised by the Minister that people from his department are going to meet with representatives from there. But I suppose, Taoiseach, what this highlights is the fact that it's a little bit, you know, of the cat before the horse, and that what we need with situations like this is consultation. I've been ahead of time, and not, for example, what happened in that case. And what happened in that case was us, being county councillors, TDs, senators, we were all notified after the deal being done, as we'll say. One thing that I'd like confirmation of here today, if either you or the Minister could clarify, has an actual contract been put in place with that particular property? In other words, before meeting with these people at all, can we be told here on the floor at Dáil, is this a deal done? In other words, is the meeting coming the same as we were informed, too little, too late? Or can you confirm what exactly is the contractual situation between the owner of the property or the company operating it and the department dealing with these international protection applicants? I do want to say that it is so important that we protect what I would call the tourism product in Killarney. And don't get me wrong, Killarney Town, as County Kerry, and as the rest of the country has done, has risen to the challenge that has befallen us. And of course, it would be very wrong and unfair for anybody to point their finger and say, well, you know, this is your fault. I mean, you didn't invade the Ukraine. We were left with this situation that we are in. But we do have to raise questions with regard to the amount of people that travel from other countries, jump other countries to come here as international protection applicants seeking protection in this state. Why are we so attractive as against everywhere else? And what I do have to say is that the business people that marched last Saturday, this was not a group of people who were angry or outraged for the sake of being outraged. These were residents from the Muckross Road and from the housing estates around it. There were employers in the town who attended a public meeting, what I would call a town hall style meeting, a very respectful and very sound meeting that was chaired by two former local representatives themselves, and the meeting was held very, very properly. And a number of things were raised at that. And it was questions for the ministers, questions as to why Killarney was being put in this situation.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach, to respond.
Thanks very much, Deputy. At the outset, I just want to recognise that very many communities across the country, including in Kerry, have accepted and even welcomed large numbers of Ukrainians and also international protection applicants in the last few years. With respect to King's Court Inn in Killarney, Minister Gorman has met with the Kerry TDs and the Mayor of Kerry, the Mayor of Killarney and the Chief Executive of Kerry County Council. I think that may have been about 2 weeks ago now. And the community engagement team in Minister Gorman's department is engaging with elected reps in Kerry and will continue to do so, and is also happy to engage with representatives of local residents. I understand that a contract is now in place, that there is a contract in place, but I don't know the details of that. I appreciate that Kerry, for example, now has about 685 international protection applicants living in the county. With roughly 3% of the population, that is roughly 3% of international protection applicants. But I appreciate that there may be particular places within Kerry where the number is high, and that does have an impact on local services and the local economy. And we understand people's concerns in that regard. For this reason, the government is putting in place a scheme to help small business. Mr Coveney is currently developing that, a €250 million scheme to help all businesses with increased costs. And separate to that, Minister Martin is developing a dedicated scheme through Fáilte Ireland to help businesses where their footfall has been affected by the fact that a large proportion of tourist beds have been taken out of the system in order to accommodate people seeking refuge from abroad.
Well, I thank you for being factual in telling us that the contract is in place, because there was uncertainty about that. But what that tells me is officials now meeting with public representatives, be they councillors, TDs or the local residents, is actually a waste of time, because the deal is done and the people are going into that property according to what you were just after saying. And what I'm asking you is, how right is that to do that in this way, with no consultation with the local councillors, no consultation with residents' associations who are so worried? There's a very elderly lady living right next door to this property who's very worried about the change that this is going to have on her property. That we have the situation that there are young couples around in the surrounding estates and middle and older age people who have paid off their mortgages, and they're very fearful about this. So that is why it is so important that you're saying now that we're going to have engagement, but we're having engagement after the contract being put in place. That's the wrong way to do our business. That's not the right way to engage with communities, and that's not the way to bring communities with us. And if the place is wrong, and if Killarney Town is full, I would believe that the department should recognise that. And I think in the interest of protecting local jobs in our community and protecting the tourism product that people have worked for over 100 years, there are families steeped in the tradition of hospitality, and now they feel their businesses are being put in danger because of this.
Thanks, Deputy. As I mentioned in my earlier reply, a community engagement team has been established. It is engaging directly with elected reps, relevant local authorities, the local development companies and other entities and individuals. The purpose of the community engagement team is to improve the flow of information regarding arrivals into areas and to help equip local communities with the information required to help them understand the current situation and to assist with the welcome and integration process for new arrivals. So the team is there. It's there to hear people's concerns. It's there to respond to people's concerns. People will have reasonable concerns around the impact on services like healthcare and education, issues around safety in some cases, issues around the impact on the local economy. And the whole role of that community engagement team is to give people information, to dispel misinformation, to listen to genuine concerns that people have when a large number of people move into their town. And that's the whole idea around engagement. But I should say, and I know you're not saying otherwise, I should say that there is nobody who has a right of veto to say who lives near them, beside them, in their town and village. I don't, you don't, and I know you're not calling for it. So it's not a case that community engagement is about seeking permission from communities as to whether people are going to move into their area. It is about information, dispelling misinformation, and responding to genuine worries about services, safety and the local economy.
Sin Gerald Keshtan and the Gannery, agus Rev Bugger Rai, but Watlam Kid Mila Falcha.